Hey y'all, welcome back to Conversations with Pela. Today's show is brought to you by Utah Grown. That is utahgrown.co for all information for the Utah Medical Cannabis Program. If you feel like you are interested in finding out if this is the program that is right for your wellness practice, your wellness routine, go to utahgrown.co and take a look at things. Look at the qualifying medical conditions if you're a potential patient. Look for information on continuing education and the answers that you need if you are a medical provider and you have patients who have questions or you have questions about how to integrate this into your medical practice. Utah Grown is the leading source of information in the state of Utah. utahgrown.co. Let us get started. Over the weekend, my child asked me to go with him to see Odyssey, and I don't know how I managed to be so out of things that I didn't even realize that the movie was being made, nor that it was coming out. I think there are so many youngins around me who know the musical Epic, and they're constantly singing it, and I just kind of assumed that that's what was going on this whole time. By the way, lots of crazy things have happened over the weekend, but maybe I'll talk about it tomorrow. It, it, Spain, Spain won the World Cup. That's not crazy. I'm glad it was Spain. That's all I can say. Um, but Epic the musical, which is the musical of the Odyssey. So the Odyssey comes out. We go to see it, and I haven't heard any hype around this movie. The only thing I've heard, which I didn't even associate with the making of the movie or even the release, was that people had that same old tired complaint that Lupita shouldn't have been black and played Helen of Troy. Just like they did with Star Wars when they had the black character, and just like they did with the Little Mermaid. All these fictional characters, they shouldn't be black. Okay, well, Cleopatra shouldn't have been white, but that was done. And then tired arguments. And so when I hear stuff like that, I'm just like, if all the critical thinking in your body can only take you that far, I'm not interested in this conversation. There's way more things to be interested about concerning any project other than that level of casting. The other thing that is crazy to me is that Christopher Nolan has put out incredible movies. They are epic. So why would that be the thing that we question? But all of those conversations that happened around this, which, later I picked up on, later as in after I had already seen the movie, then when I start to see people critique, I'm like, oh, people were arguing about this. That's interesting. That's interesting. Um, Especially after seeing the finished product. And then I realize in some situations, in many situations, any press is good press. You know, any press is good press. Anything that draws attention to what you're doing, it's good. It works out. And um, I think people go to see things when they're mad because they want to prove how right they are. I think people talk about things when they're mad because they want to have something to talk about. And yeah, all press is good press, essentially, if you know how to make it work. That's kind of sort of what it comes down to. And I think that the production team and the marketing team and everybody involved in making the Odyssey, did a fantastic job. Fantastic job. Um, okay, I'm going to tell you, I don't know how there can be spoilers. When I was a kid, my mom, English is not her first language. So she used to, long before she was married and had kids, she read a lot, and then she used to tell me there was a radio station in Samoa, and guys would come on the radio and they'd retell these stories, and they tell it in Samoan so that the people could understand it, but they were stories from maybe English literature, maybe Greek literature, maybe Russian literature, and she would listen, and she loved those stories so much. So as a child coming up, um, she was always telling she was always telling us stories. I knew the story of the man who got stuck in the cage, or the cave of the Cyclops. And the only way that he and his men could get out was to hang on to the wool, the underbelly of these giant rams or these giant sheep, to sneak out of the cave. But they were stuck in there for such a long time with the Cyclops. And in fact, I remember from her telling of it that maybe the Cyclops, in a way, was holding them prisoner. I remember stories that she would tell me. There's other ones. Um, that have nothing to do with the Odyssey. But she would tell me bits and pieces of the Odyssey, but she never told me that the name of the book was the Odyssey. She used to tell me the story of Les Mis, and she never told me that the name of the book was Les Mis. So I had all these bits and pieces in these stories, and I love to listen to my mom tell stories. I have always done it. She's just good at it in a way that like keeps me super interested and engaged. Um, so there are a lot of stories from the story of the Odyssey, and even a little bit from the story of the Iliad that she has told me, but she tells it to me from her lens of she heard it, or if she read it, this is what she picked up on. Because when she was in college here in the United States, when she was in college in Samoa, everything made sense because it was in Samoan. But when she was in college in the United States, she had to kind of figure out like she's learning the language and reading these college level books and trying to figure out what the story is telling her. And then when I finally came along years later, she's telling me those stories. So I've known the story of the Odyssey, bits and pieces here and there. I've read it. I've read it from the standpoint of war, uh, and the way that this was put together in the movie was fantastic. I felt very much like when I was a kid. My mom tells me stories, but on my dad's side, it was a little bit different. My dad has three brothers, and two of them were military, just like my father. And the kids didn't hang out with my uncles. They just didn't. And I didn't go to that side of the family very often. But when I did, I found ways to just kind of sit quietly where my uncles were and to just listen. Because I mean, what are you going to say when you're 10, 13, whatever? What kind of contribution are you going to have to a conversation with grown folk? So I would sit and I would listen, and they would tell me about their time in the war, how they ended up with a Purple Heart, all the different military practices they'd go on, and they're not actually telling me; they were talking to each other and they were laughing, and I got to soak up all of those stories. Um, I felt just like I did back when I was a kid, sitting on the floor listening to my uncles talk. I felt the same way as I was watching this movie, The Odyssey, watching this warrior go through his life and figure things out. Another thing, I may not stay here long, and I may think about this more and come back and talk about it throughout the rest of the week because the movie was just excellent. Um, but it was a feeling of like you're sitting at the feet of Odysseus while he is recounting what it was and what it was and what it was. And then at some point, um, this man kind of has to make peace with himself. He has to decide if he can face the person that it really turns out he always was and allowed himself to continue to be. Because without being able to face that, without being able to hold on to that truth, he is unable to return home. So this man is out on the sea for 10 years. He's just stuck and he can't get back. And his men can't get back. And they portray these men to be such honorable people. And yet somehow they just, the honor in their system is not enough to give them right decisions to get home. That's what it feels like. Um, but really, it felt to me like a story of Odysseus making peace with himself. In the sense that I did this, I did this, my men did this. One time there was an author that I interviewed actually a couple times, but during one of the interviews, and that one the interview that never made it to press. Um, this guy was a soldier, an elite soldier, not that long ago. He and I are probably just a couple years apart in age. So his career was to be an elite soldier. And during one of these interviews, he said, and it was the most introspective way that he said it, that at some point you start to wonder if you've become the monster, you know? Like you go out to fight monsters, and at some point you got to start asking yourself, have I become the monster? And I've known several people who are soldiers on that level. I'm always impressed, even if I'm not friends, even if we don't get along. Um, I've known several soldiers, and it seems like that is a recurring theme where at a certain point, they start to ask, after all of these things, have I become the thing that I'm fighting? And the truth is, in order to fight a monster on some very big level, you must become like the monster. Else, how do you exploit the vulnerabilities of that situation? You know what I'm saying? And that's true of anything. That you don't have to be a soldier to have that. Um, think about it like I've met a lot of people who've gone through transformation where they decided that their life wasn't working the way that it was. And then in order for them, I took a self-improvement course, and it was pretty extensive. It went on over two whole years, um, learning and looking at things deeply. And I remember one of the first things that I had to admit was that all the stuff that I had done didn't happen to me, but that I was a participant in all of it. That the common denominator in everything was me, because it was my life. I made the choices that got me to where I was, and um, even if that choice felt like, even if I didn't know I was making a choice, even if I was unaware and I didn't have enough knowledge or education of my own situation, it didn't negate the fact that I was the person who was there. You know what I mean? It doesn't change that I participated in an idea that didn't work out for my good. And I know that sounds really ominous, like maybe I had joined the cartel or something like that. I did not. I did not. I've never been offered that opportunity. But I'll say this: I grew up thinking that my first priority was to take care of my family, and I don't mean my children and the person I was married to. I mean my parents and my brothers and sisters. And I believe that so deeply that there was nothing I could do if I hadn't taken care of that responsibility first. And when you've got a lot of things that you want to do and you realize, oh, but what about these guys? What about these guys? What about these guys? You stop doing that thing where you put your own oxygen mask on first, and now you're running throughout the plane trying to get everybody else masked up, and nobody's saving you, because the only person who could save you was yourself. And so recognizing that maybe somebody taught that to me at one point, but I definitely adopted that way of thinking, and then that way of thinking was stopping me from taking care of my own business, of moving forward. It's crazy to think that at some point in your life, you've got to choose yourself in order to make progress. You see that? I know that there are so many people in this world who are very uncomfortable with that concept, that you've got to put yourself first in order to do anything else, and to do it well and to do it effectively. Because plenty of us have not chosen ourselves first, and have chosen others first, and have made progress. But at some point that progress stops, because now you're pulling the load for too many, and you just don't have time for yourself. That's very common with mothers, you know. But then you start to think, well, pick myself first. That's very selfish. In fact, if you were to say that to a lot of people, they would say back to you, that's very selfish, because then they would have to face that if it's true, they also are not choosing themselves first. But here's this is like the positive side of it. If you're able to choose yourself first, then you give yourself space to choose others, right? So if you put it in a negative context, or in a different light, not really a negative context, think of it this way: you cannot fight a monster if you can't be a monster. This is going back to Odysseus. And this man had to, at some point, recognize that part of him was trying to not get home. He didn't want to face what he had created. And he had to accept that. He had to accept that, yeah, this is a situation that, like, I very much participated in. And it's not just based on honor, and it's not just based on loyalty to the king. It's not just based on this, that, and the third. I became a person who wasn't good. And I was surrounded by people who weren't good. And if I can't admit that, my soul won't give me enough relief to return home to change things. That's what it felt like. You should go see the movie and you should tell me what you think happened, because that's what I got out of it. And usually, whatever we get out of it is a reflection of where we are in life. I'm thinking, yeah, that might have more to do with me than it did to do with the movie, but the movie was excellent. The movie was excellent, and for all the foolishness in the press that came out ahead of it, uh, I kind of wish people had time to. I wish it was more common to sit back and say, well, let me actually see what this is before throwing all the judgments out there and being mad about stuff that you don't even know is real or not. Anywho, time for us all to get to work.